Welcome to the Butterfly Effect Studio. I'm your host, Christian Revenig. As you know, based in the Chaos 3, small changes can have a big impact. The goal of this session is to uncover how leaders and change makers develop their purpose, competence, and community to achieve their great positive impact. Every of the episodes is packed full of ideas you can apply to your own life. In this session, I'm very excited to speak to Ben Unterkofler, co-founder and Chief Growth Officer of ShareFoods. With ShareFoods, every product a customer buys helps somebody in need. By education, Ben is actually an actor, played in several productions, including the famous Tardot episodes. We know each other from Share the Meal, a global donation platform we developed together for the United Nations World Food Program. Ben, really excited to have you in the studio.
Happy to be here. And I just thought about it today. I think it's exactly almost 10 years ago that we first time, this was the first time we met, I think it was April 2013.
What a journey. What a journey. It was so exciting. So then we'll just jump into that. I was thinking of that preparation actually. What has driven you actually from an actor by education to actually make this transformation to, go become an entrepreneur, and really having such a big impact also on the world?
I mean, between the acting part and now being an entrepreneur, there were also like a couple of years searching, let's say it like this, but I also studied. I studied business and politics, my bachelor's in Cologne, and did my master's at LSE in London in international political economy. And I think this words brings it together. What motivates me in the end. I mean, I was always interested in destinies of people and why some people are good and some people are bad. I like in my youth, I love to be part of these people and be like being an actor, like think about how should you react if you like, let's say a drug addict or somebody who kills somebody or somebody who's famously rich and treats other people bad. But what was more like, what is the sub-layer of that is why are we like that? Why are we doing things like that in the society and don't do other things which might be better for society? And that after this acting part, I started to have like this journey to find out what is interesting, like why are we doing that in a bigger scale? And then I started to look into the systems we invented. This was the reason why I'm studying economics and politics in the first place, because in the end, these are just game rules we invented ourselves, right? From democracy, autocracy, dictatorship, and capitalism or communism, all systems we invented, and some stick and some others don't. And right now we are in the phase where, for example, democracy is in a declining stage, and autocracy is in an increasing stage. But capitalism is the one system we all agreed on, that we all want to trade with each other. And in these systems, there's a lot of good stuff, but also a lot of flawed stuff. And to bring us further, when you look into facts, scientific facts, how we treat the world, how we treat ourselves, what could we change or adapt in these systems to make ourselves and this place a better place? This is what drives me, and this is like why I ended up with Share. But this is actually a journey, like long story for your short question.
So you're thinking about how can you use the rules to have a better impact and create better outcomes?
Yeah.
In a nutshell, if I understand it correctly. Wow. There's a lot of potential, and I would love to jump now into actually changing the rules of the game. But I understand also that it's about accepting how they are today and embracing that and seeing how we can use them actually for the better. Looking back at your achievements, I mean, I would be really interested. You mentioned actor embodying people, but what what was an event which made you reconsider? What it was, was it a process or was it like an enlightenment moment where you say, hey,
I mean, I think it was a silent process because I was lucky that I have had a chance to meet a lot of famous people and work with a lot of famous people, at least in Germany, and did some also very cool movies I'm proud of still. But I think there were like two things which were like in the end, like triggers why I changed my paths. The one thing is, you always are just saying lines of somebody else, right? So somebody wrote your lines, had the story, but you're not the story maker. You can't change something. Maybe you slightly change the sentence, but the meaning has to be the same. So in the end, I was just I don't know the English word for that. In German, I would say Hülle, like the you're just like
the frame,
exactly. You're just the frame for the picture in the end. Somebody else wrote, and this was something which triggered me. And the other thing was that I really wanted to change something. I was always like, I was lucky to grew up in a family where news always were important. I read a lot of news every day. I read a lot of books, and I have problems with accepting that some people are treated unfairly and others are making gain of it. And I wanted to change that. And I think those two things had me to decide to leave.
But isn't it scary? I mean, this was a path which was not known for you, and jumping into the cold water. Haven't you been scared?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, because it was completely different. I grew up in a small town next to Bonn, which was like the former capital of Germany. It's like, and this former capital just has 400,000 citizens, so really not big. And the small town I grew up with was like 20,000. So I was the only actor, let's say, in at least 200 kilometers surrounding. So of course, I thought like I'm Adonis. I'm the star of everything. And then starting to study the uni like Cologne, where you're just really just a number. I hadn't had any contact with professors. I think twice I met professors, and that was for my bachelor thesis. So after 3 years,
Wow.
we're just a number. Like this is something which treats you at this university, which was a great lesson for me. Somebody who thought like everybody knows me, to be an anonymous number. This was, of course, a scary fact. But on the other side, there was much more security. I mean, being an actor is one of the most insecure things you can do. You're sitting there and you're waiting literally that that your phone rings and your agent is on the line and tells you there's another casting. Being in a university and you do your bachelor's for the next 3 years gave me some kind of security. So it was something up, but on the other side, you got something in return. So it was fine. Let's say it like this.
Maybe also, and we mentioned it, you founded Share Foods, but you also have the word Share a Meal. You help tremendously, I think, impact already poor people. Maybe help what you mentioned before that they are to balance a little bit at least this unfairness in this world. Yeah. But what is literally what are the things what are you proud of? Maybe when you look back on your life. Yeah.
I think the most straightforward answer is that I was lucky to found Share and find the right people to work with. Share was a journey for me between uni and Share the Meal even, where we both met. I was in the politics, so I was in the European Parliament, I was in the German Parliament working there. So it was really a journey to find out where can I do the most impact for myself. And Share, I think, really brings it down now to have a private company which does really their part to do good. I mean, we're just almost 5 years old now and have donated over 7 million euros in donations. And over 120 million shares happened. So over 120 million times people shared with somebody else in need. This only because we had this one idea in 2017.
Amazing.
Yeah, this is I think the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, totally resonates. And I think this is an amazing part, and maybe it's just the beginning. I think also looking forward to actually share foods how you maybe do more actually in the future. Looking at, because you mentioned actoring, then marketing maybe more than actually politics and founding, becoming an entrepreneur. And you studied, you mentioned this as well, but what are for you, the most important learnings in life? What are the competencies which has helped you actually on your journey the most? Because this doesn't sound like a very planned, I learned this and then this is happening career.
I think this was a journey to find out what really drives me. And I think I would, when I speak in front of universities, what I do sometimes, the one thing I always give people, like the one lesson I want to give people is don't settle for okay, just find your path and really, really dump the thought that a CV is important, because a CV is not important at all. In the end, when you look in through my CV and I talk about it, it all makes sense. Yeah, but during I did it, I had no clue how this one will fit with the other. It's working in the European Parliament and then being in a startup and then and before I was an actor, it doesn't fit at all. But now where I'm standing right now and telling you this, it fits perfectly. And this is my personal story, and this is what makes me, until this point, at least successful. I think finding your own motivation and don't settle for okay is the number one. Number two is really don't think that your CV has to be a straight line or important. The CV is just in the end a piece of paper. I think the story you tell afterwards is more important. And the third one is build on your network, because without the network I've built in these different steps, I wouldn't have been there where I am right now. I wouldn't have met my co-founder. I met it through the network. I wouldn't have gone into the European Parliament, because there I also doing network and contacts helped me to find a place there. So there are a lot of steps where just network helped me. And right now, network is my daily business. Without network, I wouldn't could reach the next steps as Chief Growth Officer from Share. Amazing.
And maybe one step back before we talk about network, because I also think network is a big one. Talking about, you mentioned already the CV is just a story, but that means also storytelling is really important, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. Storytelling is super important. But also, in the end, you have to, when somebody, for example, applies at Share, big lesson for me was, because I'm also coming from a big university, I thought LSE and so on, the big ones, super important. So I always look for the big names. I found out this is my biggest mistakes hires were from people who had the straight CV and coming from these big universities and had their internship with McKinsey and whatsoever. The best hires I had so far who had the best story, and are super motivated. They know what they're driven. For example, one of my best employees right now in my team is somebody who was a hairdresser before. So she had some steps in between, but she's not coming from a big university, and she's not. So I hired her because the last startup where she went bust. And she went through it. So she had the whole restructuring part in it, and she comes from a place where she's not coming from a university part and so on, where with the big degree. And until now, she's one of the best employees I've ever had, because she has an amazing story. She found out what drives her, and she knows what it means to be in tough times as well. I'm looking more for that profiles who are completely far off, but interesting.
I would love that. Okay, so just for the audience, yes, storytelling is important, but really the key is follow what drives you at that point. Yeah, so figure out what you want, what is your inner drive, and pursue that. doesn't matter if this means changing your career from an actor to politician to an entrepreneur into whatever field. I love that. But just I want to understand it a little bit better, because nonetheless, I think we are all in our comfort zones, and these changes also. You mentioned actor, you not have been in the comfort zone, and you mentioned after actually university was a little bit better comfort zone, but nonetheless, this kind of isn't it scary when you say, hey, or when you said you have hired an amazing talent and she went through a restructuring actually. How what would you say? How can you overcome actually eventually those fears you have?
I think in general, you need like this certain hunger for change, which is in the end interconnected with your personal motivation. I mean, I have this hunger for change because I want to make this world a better place. In the means I think are necessary or are possible to what I can do right now. I can't speak in front of the UN and tell everybody that we should change stuff, but I can invent a brand that helps people to do good and make this brand more sought after, that people are longing for that. This was my personal way to think like, this is what I can do and scale impact. But what comes down to that is like my personal motivation. And the other one is really this hunger for change. And then it doesn't matter if you are quitting that and starting that, which have nothing to do with each other because they're completely different industries.
Hunger for change, but also this acceptance of what you can do now. So even you might, I love this example of the United Nations, but focus on what you can do now. And by that, your what you can change will also increase if you're successful. Oh, I love that. Ben, do you have any habits established over the last decade here? What helps you actually to stay motivated, to stay energized, to actually keep this hunger?
So I'm reading a lot about habits, like everything, Tools of Titans and Atomic Habits, and all these books are called to find like what are my habits I can adapt to be like the others. I think I have certain habits, but I don't have this, like completely honest, I don't have this super famous rule I'm super proud of what I'm doing, and I don't get up at 5 a.m. I don't do like 7 times a week sports and whatsoever. I think my habit is that I learn to be completely honest with my inner self. And I don't do that with meditation or whatsoever, but I hear into me regularly and know what to do or find out what to do during this process to adapt that I'm feeling better. When I'm seeing that I'm working too much and I'm getting out of line, then I have to change stuff to get my energy back. So I don't have this one habit, but I do different stuff. For example, right now, we had a very, very stressful time at work between the years. And I really now went for no alcohol, no meat, and really like 5 days a week sports. And this gives me energy back, what I don't normally do. But I don't have this one habit. I'm more open. Let's say it like this.
Interesting. If you say you're completely honest to yourself, and Nora from Boven, she said once, self-reflection may be one of the most important skills you need to have today. How do you take a break and then sit down half an hour and say, now is my time to reflect and think about this? Or is this like randomly on a weekend with friends? Or how do you do that?
2 things. One thing is in the morning, I force myself for like, let's say between 5 to 10 minutes, not to put my phone up, which is like the normal thing you do, but just think about the day, think about how you feel. And then normally everything pops up. After a good or not good night's sleep, you find out where you are because it's a very clean stage of your mind at this moment. And the second thing is, I talk regularly with friends who are doing more or less the same than I do. So you had like an interchange of the same problems and successes. Now I'm lucky, as Share is now a bit bigger, that I can afford a coach for myself. So once a month, I talk with this person about 360 of my life. So it's private and business. But this is like this cross check. Where are you? This person doesn't give me any like feedback in the sense what I should change. It is just more, it is mirroring where I am right now, and I'm finding out the stuff by myself then. But this is like, I would say this is the biggest luxury I have in my life, that I can do that once a month, because it helps you really to find out where are you right now, because you have to have the self-perception. When you are a founder, it's super important. If you work a lot in general, it's super important that you're not losing yourself in it. Because like burnouts are the most, like the risk to have a burnout is the highest when you love your work, right? And when you do it a lot. So this is a high risk factor you have to have in your mind. And the other one is just simple being a manager and being responsible for other people. You should be very well aware about how are you and yourself.
Thank you very much. That's I think very inspiring actually, and very concrete also. I think helps eventually a lot of listeners. Ben, you mentioned your hairdresser. I'm sorry, I don't know her name, but I need to call her not. Yeah. But how she applied? But how do you mentioned you look for people who have an interesting story, but what are the other key competencies you're looking for, which everybody in your team actually needs to have?
Yeah.
Because it's not the big brand, it's not the LSE. So
sure.
How do you identify that?
A university can be an indicator if you know how the university works. When people coming from Cologne, for example, I know they are normally not dependent on. They're not highly dependent, because they had to be independent for 3 years because nobody gave them help, right? So this is an indicator for me. Like maybe they've changed, but how I did it in 2011, and for me it was the best lesson to this point. But I think to be successful with us and with Share, and what I'm looking for is, like, first of all, again, this hunger for change. People have to have some certain drive. For Share, it's definitely impact. That's the first indicator. Do they change there something, and do they want to change something in the field they're working? For example, if we hire people in the online spectrum, I really want to see, like, what do you want to build with us? And is this something new? If there's somebody coming just like it's a copycat, I don't need like copycats here. Like this rocket kind of school from back in the time is like really outdated in my point of view. I think you have to be fast. You have to have a fast adaptability. So you and with that comes a certain resilience, also which comes of your mood, because it's a high scaling and a high growth startup. So here's a lot of stuff changing all the time, and somehow you have to love it. Or if you don't love it, you are flexible in adapting, and you bring this certain resilience to work. Because otherwise, I think it can be a bath of emotions when that stuff's like you work on stuff for 3 months and then it certainly stops and you say like, no, we're going this way. It happens, right? And the last one is, and for that you don't need to have the big university. You have to have somehow either it's a story, your track record, or what you have to do. And like when we do our interview with, we always have a business case in it, or a case in general. It has to be just an exceptional work. So your output has to be just exceptional. And at the same time, you have to be just a fun person to work with. And I think this combination is the gold nugget we are looking for. And then it's really, we don't care where you're coming from, what's your degree about, if you have even a degree. It's really this combination of people who have this certain resilience, are fun, love to be on the ride. They don't know where it ends, and to be part of it. That's kind of mindset.
Yeah. So, hunger for change, for you, case, it's impact. I like that what it said, not a copycat, but have your original story. Have a reason why you do the things you do is more important than what you do, but then and trying to be excellent at that. Thank you. Now we need to talk about the community. And you mentioned already network has helped you tremendously in your career. It's one of the key facts, actually, how these things eventually add up. So maybe share a little bit, what have been how did you find those kind of, or is it like what you mentioned, is this a practice that you say, hey, I'm open for new connections, or was there any more, how did you find people who will help you, who can work together with? You mentioned this kind of is this networking? Is this just randomly? Is there any, how do you build this network?
I think two stories I want to tell about networking. One thing is like answering of your question, and I think the other one is what's the secret sauce of networking. I think building up a network, you can always start. Like it starts actually with your friends and what your friends like on your family. Who knows somebody in your friends and family network? It doesn't mean like I'm not coming from a big old German family whatsoever. I'm coming from a very randomly normal family. But even there, you found somebody who knows somebody who might be helpful. In the end, I think there was this famous quotation with Facebook. I think you need to have like 6 friends and you know the world or something like that. So there's an equation of how many people you have to know in the social network. And actually, like our life is a social network, so it works the same. And then wherever you start working or where you have or university, whatsoever, who maybe your professor is, who your professor maybe might know or can introduce you, or like your peers and whatsoever, you always find somebody where you can build up a network. You should need to know what you want from these people. In the long term, don't like meet them and then come up with your ask right away. It's normally not helpful. But build a network over time. And all my steps in the end were like networking steps. Some people from the LSE helped me to found over University of Cologne, and where I did like help out in a called, this was a business dialogue made by students. There I met Sebastian, my co-founder. I met over a professor, somebody who can introduce me to somebody in the German parliament. Like there was always like people I could like get into and get introduced, because like just writing the application to somebody and hope that it works out is, there you can't sell a story, by the way, and it's not the best reply. I think build your network over time and you can start everywhere in the end.
But you mentioned the secret sauce, but is it like this kind of, okay, I have a goal in mind, but you don't start? So is it first that you always need to give something? What is your secret sauce?
My like what was the purpose behind my network was like, who can help me finding jobs or like people to talk with who have impact, in the sense of impact on society in a positive sense. I was not sure to this point, is it environmentally, is it just social, is it maybe also economically or on a political side? So this was why I went into different fields to find out, will I be lucky in the politics? Will I be lucky in the private sector? I didn't know to this point. So I tried to find out. The secret sauce nowadays for me is that my network is super diverse. I have people from the acting field. I know directors, famous photographers, videographers. I know politicians. I know people who are in big how's it called, Verbände.
Not unions, but other communities. Let's call it communities.
It's called communities, but also like from the startup sphere, investors and so on, so on. So I have like, let's say your network is tool set. So I have a very diverse tool set now. I'm proud of to say it like this in brackets, because it's so helpful. Also because when you want to grow your network, or you want to, like, you talk to somebody and this person needs a favor, you have much more abilities to help this person, and at some point you will ask this person for help, and then you know what he did, right? So I think the secret sauce to network is to keep it diverse. Even if you're like, you want to be a banker or whatsoever, you shouldn't talk only with bankers. It doesn't help you.
And how do you manage your networks? Because also, if you the older you get, the more people you know, the more networks you're part of. But it's also like, wow, it's a time intense, isn't it?
It is. But you can also stage it. You don't have to be in contact with everybody every time, but you should look into your contacts and think about who are important people to you. You don't like, and it doesn't mean that they are urgently important, but they might be also important in the future. I know somebody, for example, who was my former boss in the European Parliament. This guy is not in the European Parliament more, but is now working in the government from another country. And I don't know. This guy was just extremely helpful for me from a personal standpoint, because he really helped me to find my paths when I was not sure what is the next step. So this is a person I never knew. Might be this person is maybe helpful in the future, but also, like, from a personal standpoint, he's just helpful. There are tons of other examples why people can be important for you in the future. Yeah,
a little bit like the black swan phenomenon. You don't know what you don't know yet, but it might be a great opportunity eventually behind that. Yeah,
that people just know other people again, and can help you.
Yeah. And we need to come to an end slowly, but I have a few more short questions. Yeah. Do you have a role model or somebody who inspires you?
Finally, I thought about this a couple of weeks ago, and I found out that I don't have a role model. And then I questioned myself if I need to have a role model. But I don't have one anymore. Back in the time, of course, Obama was for me a huge role model. But I'm now doing different stuff, and it's not adaptable to certain things anymore. I have a role model when I want to have a family like in the future. Even my best friend is a role model for me, because how he, for example, is doing his next steps in life are something I look up to. But I don't have this one role model where I say, like, I want to be like this person. I don't have that.
Which advice would you give your younger self if you now look back, finish school? What would you say? Hey, Ben, that's something you need to watch out for. That's something you need to learn. What would you, looking back, with all now makes sense, but would you give any advice to your younger self today?
I would give me the same advice I now give to other people, because it sounds like don't think about your CV, and so there's like these huge thoughts I had back in my time. I didn't have them. I was like thinking all the time, is this the next step? Can I argue that in my CV and whatsoever? So I would give my younger self the advice: don't look at your CV, just do it. Build your network. You're doing great in that already, and find really what makes you excited. I don't see. I'm lucky to say that there are no big mistakes I regret. Even mistakes I did were like the good lesson for the next step. So
it makes all sense looking backwards. Yeah,
I would just calm myself a bit more and say, like, dude, relax. It will turn out how you want to be.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Any further thoughts or anything else you want to share with the audience, with the learners here?
I think the only thing I would say or advise is don't think too much, just start doing stuff. You can't fail if you just start. Like in a higher sense, you can't fail. I mean, of course you can fail in a certain thing, but it will make you richer, and it will help you for a next step. Don't overthink.
we perfectly come to the beginning. Life is a journey. Don't settle for okay. And don't look for your CV. Build your own journey. Ben, thank you so much actually for joining our Butterfly studio today here. I really enjoyed the discussion with you. I hope it was also interesting. I believe it's interesting for the learners. Thank you so much.
Same. Thanks for having me.